June 7, 1944. Normandy countryside. Unteroffizier Wilhelm Hoffmann of the 352nd Infantry Division crouched behind a hedgerow, his Mauser 98K rifle pressed against his shoulder, waiting for the American patrol he knew was coming. 5 rounds in the magazine, bolt-action precision that had served the Wehrmacht across Poland, France, Russia. The same rifle his father had carried in the Great War, refined, proven, superior. The Americans appeared through the morning mist, perhaps 8 men, moving cautiously through the bocage. Hoffmann squeezed off his first shot, hit. He worked the bolt, ejected the casing, chambered the next round. By the time he was ready to fire again, the air had turned to lead. The sound was wrong. Not the measured crack, crack, crack of rifle fire he knew, but something continuous, sustained, impossible. 8 rifles firing as fast as machine guns, semi-automatic fire that shouldn't exist in an infantry squad. Hoffmann pressed himself into the dirt as bullets shredded the hedgerow above him. His squad's return fire, disciplined and accurate, was drowned in the sheer volume of American lead. 5 shots, work the bolt. 5 shots, work the bolt. Against men who simply pulled the trigger 8 times and reloaded with a metallic ping that would haunt German infantry across Europe. The mathematics were brutal and simple. In the time it took a German soldier to fire 5 aimed shots, an American with an M1 Garand could empty 8 rounds, reload, and put 8 more downrange. This was not how it was supposed to be. The German military doctrine, refined through centuries of Prussian tradition, emphasized marksmanship, discipline, the superiority of the trained soldier over material abundance. The Mauser was a masterpiece of engineering, accurate to 1,000 meters, each shot deliberate and devastating. German soldiers were taught that one well-aimed shot was worth 10 spray-and-pray attempts. They had conquered most of Europe with this philosophy. But the Americans hadn't come to play by those rules. They had come with 2 million M1 Garands. General George Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. Not a tank, not artillery, not the aircraft that darkened European skies, but a rifle. 8 pounds of walnut and steel that could deliver 30 rounds per minute in trained hands, accurate to 500 yards, semi-automatic fire that turned every American infantryman into what German troops initially mistook for a machine gun team. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Obergefreiter Hans Müller, captured near St. Lo, told interrogators he had counted 5 enemy soldiers in a farmhouse. His squad of 12 had initiated the assault textbook perfectly, overlapping fields of fire, one squad advancing while another covered. The covering fire from 6 Mausers should have been sufficient. Instead, those 5 Americans had put out what seemed like automatic weapons fire, pinning the entire German squad while calling in artillery. "We thought they all had automatic weapons," Miller said. "How else could 5 men outshoot 12? The answer lay in Springfield Armory, Massachusetts, where John C. Garand, a Canadian-born designer who never became an American citizen until 1920, had spent 17 years perfecting a gas-operated mechanism that would change warfare forever. While German ordnance officials in the 1930s had rejected semi-automatic rifles as wasteful of ammunition, too complex for soldier maintenance, and unnecessary, given proper training, the United States had quietly tooled up to produce what would become 4 million rifles. The production statistics told a story the Wehrmacht intelligence had catastrophically missed. By 1944, Springfield Armory and Winchester were producing 4,000 M1 Garands per day. The entire German semi-automatic rifle production for the war, the Gewehr 43, would total 400,000 units. The Americans produced that many Garands every 3 months, but it wasn't just the rifles. It was the ammunition to feed them. The United States produced 21 billion rounds of .30-06 ammunition during the war. 21 billion. German soldiers, trained to make every round count because ammunition was precious, found themselves facing enemies who could afford to suppress every suspicious bush, every potential hiding spot, every shadow that might conceal a threat. Lieutenant Friedrich Weber of the 2nd Panzer Division wrote in his diary, found after his death near Falaise, "They shoot at everything. A movement in a window, they put 20 rounds through it. We fire once, they respond with 100 bullets. How can one fight such waste?" He couldn't know that what seemed like waste was actually industrial calculation. The United States was producing 47 billion rounds of small arms ammunition total, 2 million rounds for every German soldier who would serve during the entire war. The first German reports of facing the Garand had come from North Africa, dismissed by Berlin as exaggeration from defeated units seeking excuses. Surely the Americans couldn't have equipped every infantryman with a semi-automatic rifle. It was logistically impossible, economically unfeasible, tactically unnecessary. The Oberkommando der Wehrmacht had wargamed this scenario in 1938 and concluded that semi-automatic rifles would consume ammunition at such rates that no army could sustain them in prolonged combat. Their calculations were correct. An American infantry company in sustained combat did consume ammunition at rates that would have collapsed German supply lines. The Americans simply built supply lines that could handle it. By D-Day, the United States was shipping 700,000 tons of supplies per month to Europe. 700,000 tons. Every month, including 40 pounds of ammunition per day for every combat soldier. Hauptmann Erich Richter learned the reality in the Hürtgen Forest, September 1944. His company of veteran infantry, survivors of the Eastern Front, men who had faced Soviet human wave attacks and survived, took positions in the dense woodland with confidence. They knew forest fighting, where visibility was limited, where marksmanship mattered more than volume of fire, where the discipline of the German soldier should dominate. The first patrol contact shattered those assumptions. The American squad, emerging from the mist at 30 meters, should have been perfect targets for his experienced riflemen. Instead, the forest exploded with semi-automatic fire. Trees were stripped of bark, branches severed, the very air seemed to turn solid with lead. His men's return fire, accurate and disciplined. One shot, work the bolt, aim, one shot was simply overwhelmed. It was like fighting men armed with machine guns, he reported to division headquarters, except they could move and fire, advance and fire, take cover and continue firing without the limitations of automatic weapons. The Garand's en-bloc clip system, fed from the top with 8 rounds held in a spring steel clip, had seemed inferior to German designs that used detachable magazines. German engineers had laughed at the distinctive ping sound the rifle made when ejecting an empty clip, claiming it would give away the shooter's position and status. In combat, that theoretical disadvantage vanished in the cacophony of battle. Meanwhile, the practical advantage was overwhelming. A trained American soldier could reload in 3 seconds. 3 seconds from empty to 8 more rounds ready. The German soldier with his Mauser needed to either load another 5-round stripper clip or feed rounds individually. Under fire, the difference was survival or death. Private First Class Anthony Benedetti of the 1st Infantry Division demonstrated this at Aachen. Surrounded in a ruined apartment building with 2 other soldiers, facing an assault by an entire German platoon, the 3 Americans held their position for 4 hours. 4 hours, 3 men against 40. When relieved, they had fired over 1,200 rounds between them. The German dead numbered 18, the wounded uncounted. The German after-action report, captured later, expressed disbelief. The officer writing it theorized the Americans must have had hidden automatic weapons, perhaps a cleverly concealed machine gun nest. He couldn't accept that 3 men with semi-automatic rifles had generated that volume of accurate fire. The mathematics of firepower were relentless. A German infantry squad of 10 men, built around the MG-42 machine gun with the riflemen as ammunition carriers and security, could theoretically generate enormous firepower. But that firepower was concentrated in one weapon. Knock out the machine gun, and the squad's combat power dropped by 70%. An American infantry squad of 12 men, everyone carrying a Garand, had distributed firepower. Every soldier was a base of fire. The tactical flexibility was revolutionary. German doctrine required careful positioning of the machine gun, elaborate fire plans, coordinated movement. American squads could simply shoot their way forward, every man capable of sustained suppressive fire while others maneuvered. Feldwebel Kurt Zimmermann experienced this transformation of tactics firsthand during the Ardennes offensive, what the Americans called the Battle of the Bulge. His company, part of the 1st SS Panzer Division, had achieved complete surprise, catching American units in their winter quarters. The initial success was everything German planning had hoped for. Overwhelming local superiority, American units scattered and confused, the road to Antwerp seemingly open. Then the Americans started to reorganize, not in the careful, deliberate way German doctrine prescribed, but with a fluidity enabled by firepower. Cooks, clerks, truck drivers, every American seemed to have a Garand. Scratch units formed from whoever was available could put out fire volumes that matched organized German infantry companies. "We would assault a position held by what looked like 20 men," Zimmermann recalled after the war, only to face the firepower of what seemed like 100. The Garand changed the mathematics of urban combat entirely. In Cologne, March 1945, Oberleutnant Josef Hartmann watched American infantry clear buildings with a methodology that defied everything he had been taught. German doctrine for urban combat emphasized careful room clearing, grenades followed by submachine gun teams, methodical and cautious. The Americans simply shot through walls. Entire squads would line up and fire through interior walls, their .3006 rounds penetrating plaster, brick, even light masonry. A suspected German position would receive hundreds of rounds through every wall, floor, and ceiling before Americans even entered. The expenditure of ammunition was grotesque by German standards. One building might absorb 2,000 rounds. But it worked. German casualties from this reconnaissance by fire were devastating. The cultural shock went deeper than tactics. General Major Franz Becker, commanding the remnants of the 276th Volksgrenadier Division, captured in March 1945, told his interrogators something that revealed the psychological gulf between the two armies. "Your soldiers shoot like they are wealthy," he said. "They shoot at sounds, at shadows, at possibilities." We were taught that ammunition was precious, each round a crafted piece of engineering to be used wisely. Your men shoot like farmers scattering seed, knowing that enough will find fertile ground. He was more right than he knew. The United States had mobilized its entire industrial base, converting automobile factories to ammunition production, refrigerator plants to rifle manufacturing. The Chrysler Corporation alone was producing more ammunition than all of Germany's factories combined. The most telling statistic came from a post-war study by the German General Staff in Allied captivity. They calculated that in a typical engagement, American infantry units expended 5 times the ammunition of equivalent German units. By German thinking, this should have led to catastrophic supply failures. Instead, American logistics simply delivered 5 times the ammunition. When German staff officers, trained to husband every resource, calculated the fuel consumption required just to transport this ammunition, they declared the numbers impossible. No army could sustain such expenditure. The Americans had sustained it from Normandy to the Elbe, across thousands of miles, through some of the worst weather and terrain in Europe. Major Heinrich Wolf, a logistics officer captured at Remagen, provided perhaps the most poignant observation. Shown a depot containing millions of rounds of ammunition staged for the Rhine crossing, he stood in silence for a long moment before saying, "We would count bullets. You don't even count cases." In his notebook, found among his personal effects, was a calculation. He had tried to determine how many rounds of small arms ammunition the Americans had fired in the European theater. His estimate, based on German intelligence of American unit strength and observed fire patterns, was 15 billion rounds. The actual number was closer to 20 billion. Even in defeat, the Germans couldn't fully grasp the scale of American production. The individual German soldiers' encounter with the M1 Garand often came with another shock, one that had nothing to do with firepower. Gefreiter Ludwig Braun, captured during the Ruhr pocket operation, described his amazement when he was allowed to examine a captured Garand. The rifle was beautifully manufactured, its stock polished walnut, its metal parts precisely machined and finished. This was a weapon mass-produced at rates Germany couldn't match for any equipment, yet it showed craftsmanship equal to their best sporting rifles. How could a nation produce 4 million rifles of such quality? The answer lay in something beyond German comprehension, an industrial philosophy that rejected the European assumption that mass production meant inferior quality. American factories had simply decided to mass-produce excellence. But the most profound psychological impact came from a different quarter entirely. As German units surrendered in increasing numbers during the war's final months, captured soldiers were often fed American field rations before interrogation. Obergefreiter Walter Hoffmann, captured in April 1945, described his shock at seeing American soldiers casually eating chocolate bars, canned fruit, instant coffee with real sugar. The same army that could afford to fire 20 rounds at a suspicious noise could also provide its soldiers with luxuries that German soldiers hadn't seen since 1941. When he was given a captured American K ration to eat, Hoffmann found cigarettes, toilet paper, and chewing gum included. "We were fighting men who could waste ammunition like water," he said, and still had resources for chewing gum. How does one defeat such wealth? The M1. Garand was more than a rifle. It was the physical manifestation of an entire approach to warfare that the German military mind couldn't fully grasp until too late. Where Germany had built an army around elite units and specialized equipment, conserving resources through skill and training, America had decided to make every infantryman elite through equipment. Where Germany counted on the warrior spirit and tactical superiority, America counted on industrial mathematics. The Garand turned every American private into a base of fire that would have required a German light machine gun team. Multiply that by 2 million American soldiers in Europe, and the outcome was never seriously in doubt. Lieutenant Colonel Hans von Luck, one of Germany's most successful combat commanders, survivor of Poland, France, Russia, and Normandy, captured in April 1945, provided perhaps the most succinct summary. Asked by his captors what weapon had surprised him most, he answered without hesitation, "Your rifle. We expected your tanks, your aircraft, your artillery. We knew about American industrial capacity, but we didn't expect every one of your soldiers to carry what was essentially a portable machine gun. You didn't outfight us. You simply outshot us. Every hedgerow, every street corner, every forest path, your men could generate fire superiority through nothing more than standard infantry rifles. We could never match it." The final statistics told the story in stark mathematical terms. The United States produced 4.2 million M1 Garands during World War II. Germany produced 14.6 million Mauser 98K rifles, equipping a military that fielded over 18 million men throughout the war. But those German rifles fired one shot at a time, 5 rounds before reloading. The American rifles fired 8 shots as fast as the trigger could be pulled. In the brutal mathematics of industrial warfare, every American soldier effectively wielded 3.2 times the firepower of his German counterpart. When combined with unlimited ammunition supplied by the greatest logistics network ever assembled, the result was foregone. The German soldier, no matter how well trained, how experienced, how motivated, found himself outgunned at the most basic level of warfare, rifle against rifle, man against man. The M1 Garand didn't win the war by itself, but in every firefight, in every engagement from squad to regiment level, it tilted the balance inexorably toward the Americans. German soldiers learned to recognize its distinctive sound, the rapid crack, crack, crack that meant superior firepower was about to be brought to bear. They learned to fear the ping of an ejecting clip, not because it revealed a momentarily empty rifle, but because it meant 8 more rounds were about to come their way in the next 3 seconds. They learned that American tactics weren't wasteful, but were instead the logical expression of material superiority so overwhelming that conservation was unnecessary. The irony was complete. The Wehrmacht, which had pioneered combined arms warfare, which had revolutionized military doctrine with blitzkrieg, which had shown the world that technology and tactics could overcome numerical superiority, had been defeated by the most basic military equation: rate of fire multiplied by ammunition supply. They had prepared for a war of maneuver and been destroyed in a war of production. Feldmarschall Wilhelm Keitel, signing the German surrender in Berlin, was asked by a journalist what had surprised him most about American forces. He thought for a moment before responding that every soldier was armed like our specialists. He didn't mention tanks or planes or artillery. He mentioned the rifle. In the end, the M1 Garand was exactly what Patton had called it: the greatest battle implement ever devised. Not because it was the most accurate rifle, or the most reliable, or the most powerful, but because it could be produced in millions, supplied with billions of rounds, and placed in the hands of citizen soldiers who used it to deliver such overwhelming firepower that no amount of training, experience, or determination could overcome the simple mathematics of semi-automatic fire. The German soldier, heir to centuries of military tradition, found himself on the wrong side of an industrial equation that no amount of courage could balance. Each pull of a Garand's trigger was a small statement of American industrial might, and 800 million such statements echoed across Europe between 1944 and 1945, announcing that the age of the warrior aristocrat had ended, replaced by the democracy of firepower.